I'm going to ask you to turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5 and verse 13. We'd gone through the Beatitudes, and that was the blessed and blessed. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. So as we walk through all those 8 blesseds, that's in part of chapter 5, just a section of chapter 5, all the way up to verse 12 of chapter 5. Chapter 5 has 48 verses in it, and we looked at the first 12 of those verses. Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is this whole sermon that he's giving them. Can you imagine how he's talking with them? And I don't imagine that he's really going at them. He's going, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. And as he walks down through those 8, and he ends with the persecution one, and how you're blessed when men persecute you and revile you and say all manner of evil against you falsely because of me. For great is your reward in heaven. And then it's almost, he's in a sermon now. 3 chapters of sermons, 5, 6, and 7. And he almost says to them, new subject. You know how sometimes people are talking to you and they've been talking about something and then they're going to have an abrupt change and they just say to you, new subject. Let's, and they just go, shift gears and turn in the next direction, and you go, oh, okay, and you kind of catch up with them. That's almost what it almost feels like. Jesus is blessed are the poor, blessed are the mourn, blessed are, and he goes through all those. He finishes, and then he says, you are the salt of the earth. And it's like, well, on the screen you can see what we're going to talk about, how we're to be the salt of the earth. And here's the verse, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. Most of the Bible that talks about salt is the Old Testament. You remember Lot's wife, she turned into a pillar of salt. And so throughout the Old Testament, it talks about salt. And even in Leviticus, a book that you don't often read, as they made sacrifices, he said, make sure you mix in the salt. But in the New Testament, it's only 3 or 4 times. And most of them, it's about this concept, you're the salt of the earth. In Matthew, in Luke. Later on in the New Testament, one time he says, let your speech be seasoned with salt. But apart from that, not much about salt in the Bible. So, how would they catch what he's saying to them? When all of a sudden he turns and says, you are the salt of the earth. And they're going, huh? I mean, they knew of salt. You know of salt. I don't have much to do with salt. My wife has kind of cut back on the salt for me. And the doctors say, oh, not too much salt now. I never knew much about salt, except my dad always put it on. Man, it was just, hey, pass me the salt. We'd start the meal, we'd ask God's blessing on it, and he'd say, the next thing you heard is, give me the salt. One guy decided that he would look at hiring people and decide pretty much whether he would hire them. He would take them out for dinner. And while they were out for dinner, he would see what they did with the salt. And you know what he determined by that? The food would come, and he would watch to see if they would just salt their food or whether they would taste the food and then determine whether it needs more salt or not. You see, if they're just used to it and the food comes down and they grab the salt and they start going at it, he says, they're going to do the same thing in my work. They're not going to know whether it needs it or not. Really, just a little lesson that you can grab from what somebody does without really checking things out. The Lord says you're the salt of the earth. My dad used to say, "Yeah, let's throw that salt on." When he got older, they moved out here, and some of you remember him. I used to have him up here on occasion. He was 5'2" when he was tall. And of course, then you shrink as you get older, and I used to say he was 4 feet nothing. Yeah. And I'd put my arm around him, we'd sing together. But when he finally got so he couldn't be out and about, he was in a hospital, and then the hospital said, you got to send him to a care facility and get him rehabbed so that before he goes home. I'll never forget that day. Actually, it was at Lancaster Hospital at the time, and we took him over to the care facility just to the west of Antelope Valley Hospital. He was in the ambulance. I followed over in the car. They pulled him out of the ambulance, and he saw where he was, and he looked up at me like, so it's come to this. And I said, Dad, you know, if you get your strength back here, let's get you rehabbed. The sooner you get your rehab done, the sooner you can get home. You know, because that's really what we had thought. Well, he's just there because the doctor said he had to be there. And let's make sure he doesn't fall down, and let's, somebody's there all the time and get the food he needs and be able to bathe when we couldn't do that so easily for him. So he was in there. So Audrey went 1 day a week, and Deanne went 1 day a week, and Doug went 1 day a week, and I went 1 day a week. And then Audrey would pick him up on Sundays during the second service. She would go to the first, my wife is quite amazing. Usually she sits through all 3 services and 3 sermons and stuff. But then she'd sit through the first service, drive to pick him up the second service, and bring him back and worship in the third service. So my dad, when it came to salt, here's what we do. They didn't give him any salt in the nursing home. And without something that has a little bite to it, what do people begin to say? When you eat food in the hospital, you say it tastes what? Bland. Can I use another word? I'll teach you a new word. Insipid. Insipid. Just tasteless. And so we'd say, when I went over to my day in the week to take him out, I'd say, Dad, you want to go someplace to eat? Now, great, take it. He's in the nursing home. But we'd take him out of the nursing home. You can take people out of the nursing home, Sometimes you don't want to go to the nursing home. You say, I don't like the smell. I don't like this. I don't like that. Well, take him out. Take him to a restaurant. They love to go out. So I said to him, I'd have to sign him out, and we'd take him to the restaurant. I said, where do you want to go? It was always one of those fast food places. And those fast food places, when they do those fries, you ever watch them? They take it out of that deep fry, dump it over while it's nice and, wet from that deep fry stuff, and then they take that salt shaker, flip it over some more. It's got a pound of salt on it with a half a pound of fries. And my dad would go, he's there just licking away at those, eating them down. I said to him, Dad, when we go back now to the nursing home, did you want to take any salt with you? Oh, yeah. And he'd take those little white packets. He probably had a year's supply in his drawer. He was right there just stuffing away, and he'd forget them in his pocket. And when he forgot them in his pocket, then my wife would wash his clothes, and she said, "Oh man, he had some more. Oh my goodness, he had some more salt in his pocket." But he loved salt. Why? Because as your taste buds get older, especially, you like it when you're young. What do the kids like? Those McDonald's fries? Man, yeah. She says, yeah, I do. Yeah, do you like those fries? Yeah, because that salt just makes you, and so you drink more of their soda, and then you eat more of those fries, and then you drink more of their soda. You just like that kind of stuff. And the Lord says, that kind of stuff you're the salt of the earth. But again, we don't know much about salt except it's the little thing that comes in a little white package, or it's something that the McDonald's guy just shakes on there, or it's something that you have at your table. But Where'd it come from? And if it's only mentioned four times or so in the New Testament, what's it all about when he says, all of a sudden he shifts those gears and you're the salt of the earth? Why did the Lord use that picture? Let me give you another question. Have you ever wondered why someone not doing his job is said to be not worth his what? It's not worth his salt. Why do we say that? It's because of Roman soldiers. When Roman soldiers when they didn't have money and coins and stuff and they could pay people, they used to pay people in salt. And so they would give them the salt. Well, let me just put it on the screen here and say the Roman soldiers were paid, at least in part, with a ration of salt called a salarium. Now, salarium was from the Latin word cele, which is the Latin word for salt. We write it a little differently than they would write it. We write it S-A-L-E. But we don't pronounce it like that. We'd say sail. Oh, we had a sail the other day. But there's this sele. It's salt. So what happens is the Roman soldiers would come in to get their pay and they'd give them salt. After a while, they just called it salarium. Salarium, which is a word from salt. You ready to get... The salarium will be picked up this afternoon at 1 o'clock. Line up and you'll be there. And so they would give them their pay. As it migrated and they stopped giving salt because now they had money, because it's pretty hard to give a lump of salt and then you have to kind of break it up and you go to the chicken farm and buy your eggs and you go someplace else and you give them some salt and you buy some bread and you go someplace else with a little bit of your salt and buy this. So after they got money, they kept calling the money salarium. Salarium. Not sally. Not just salt, because that was just salt. But when you got paid in salt, it was salarium. So let me just slide salarium up there for a moment. Again, that's Italian. It means your pay, and your pay in salt. Well, when we in the United States started paying people to do their work, we gave them some wages. After a while, people said, well, we used to do it like this. See the S in salarium in the Latin? We bring it down, letter S. The next letter in Latin, we change. We change it from an O to an A. And then we take the next three letters and use them letter for letter just like it is there. So we do this. And then in English we say, we have some vowels. They're A, E, I, O. He's frozen on me. Do you want some help here? A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. Sometimes Y. So when we come here, that I became a Y, and what's the word? Salary. Salary. And our word for salary came from that salarium. And that salarium was their pay. And that pay was based on salt. And so when you say, oh, that guy's not worth his salt, what are you saying? I'm paying that guy, and he's not worth what I'm paying him. Now the Lord comes along, and he says, even before this came into being, the Lord said, you are the salt of the earth. Let me tell you some things about salt so that you can kind of have some comprehension, because again, it's only mentioned 3 or 4 times in the New Testament. So why did he just reach in there and take salt out? Well, what do we know about salt? Salt is composed primarily of sodium and chloride. Salt is essential for animals to live. People, animals, life, living things need salt. Salt for human consumption is produced in 3 ways. You have unrefined salt, you have refined salt, and you have iodized salt. the unrefined salt is just from the ocean. We call it salt water. Got it? The next one, when you refine it, we have that table salt that you put out there. The iodized salt, anybody know what it's about? Why do we do that? Raise your hand if you know that. Okay. The iodized salt, in 1923, they discovered that your body and my body needs iodine. If you don't get enough iodine, well, in 1923, they started mixing it in like with salt. So people would get their iodine as they salted their food. And it helps prevent mental retardation. Your body needs that iodine. Some of you know, the older you get, that if your thyroid is affected, you need what? You need iodine. And if you don't get the iodine, then many times you get a goiter. Have you seen when, sometimes you don't see it much in our society anymore because people get enough iodine usually, but the goiter will get bigger and start growing here. And actually that's what Pastor Gary had removed, that wrapped itself around his vocal cords. And that's why he had so much difficulty, because when they took the goiter out, it damaged the vocal cords. But just iodine and the salt gets all that. When I look at this, normally it says it comes from salt water. Because what do we have the most of in the world? Ocean. We have the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean. We have all this water that has salt. Let me show you how they do it. This is a picture. This is a salt farm. Harvesting salt in Thailand. And so what they do is they take in all the water, and as it dries out, as it evaporates in these small little pond areas where they pump it, and the salt is there, and they can scrape it up. This picture was taken last year. It's not like, oh, wow, yeah, they used to do that years ago, but we don't have to do that anymore. We have a better way to do it. No, salt today is just like this. And they gather it up, and then they refine it, and then they use it in multiple ways. Again, let me remind you that chloride and sodium are needed by every known living creature. Secondly, salt is needed to regulate the balance of fluid in your body. That's why when you, if you're near heat, sometimes they give you what kind of tablets? Salt tablets. So that you can balance out that in your body. Sometimes when you run, and when you run and you start to perspire or sweat, I was told horses sweat, people perspire. Okay, but when you start to perspire or you start to sweat, and sometimes you just put your tongue on where your skin and you've been perspiring, what's it taste like? Salt. And if you don't perspire, and you don't have that balance of fluid in your body, you start to bloat, and you aren't healthy. And so God says, if you just understand, salt is needed by how many people? Everybody, all animals and everything. So the Lord says, I want you to understand the whole world needs you. You're salt. And by the way, if you don't have salt in your body, your fluids can't be what? Balanced. And you know what this world needs? They need to have that balance that they don't have anymore. But you're salt, and you need to be that in the world. Let me give you one more thing here. Sodium ion is used for electrical signaling in the nervous system, which means that your body fires off signals, and it needs the sodium to do that. That's why sometimes when the United States says, oh, salt is bad. No, too much salt is bad. And the Lord says in His Word to do everything in what? Moderation. But He puts salt here for a purpose. And as long as it's done in balance, He says, this is the way I want it. So, what does He say we're to be? You are the what? You're the salt of the earth. You're the salt of the earth. They had never heard that before. Brand new concept that day. New subject. Blessed, 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 blessed. You are the salt of the earth. Huh? But they understood, even though salt had never been mentioned before that point by Jesus, they understood why salt was there. Let me give you 4 pictures of how God will use you as the salt of the earth. Now, if you're salt, as salt, here's how God's going to use you. As salt, the Lord uses us to impede the rotting condition in our society. You say, what? Let me go on. Why was salt so important in Jesus' day? Do we think it's important today? No. No, she said no. We think it's important if you want to taste something better or something like that. But if you open up, if you go and just start grabbing some food off your shelf and see the ingredients, what's in almost every one of them? Salt. Is it important today? Yeah, but we don't go, oh, how much salt is in that? Now, my wife does. She said, oh, my sodium intake today was, and I don't want to go, oh, my goodness, look at how much sodium's in this. And if we go out to eat, and we don't go out often, but when we go out to eat, she'll say, and this is the reason why we don't go out to eat often, she'll say, oh, man, I can't hardly get my ring off, man. That salt, I can tell there was a lot of salt in that food today. Man, my fingers are all swollen up. And anybody else do that? Sweetheart, you have 3 other people. So salt is there. Why was it important in Jesus' day? I'm going to give you one major reason, and that's because they didn't have any refrigerators. Well, what do you mean? They didn't have refrigerators? Well, it's because every time they butchered an animal to eat, they would take and rub the salt into the meat and into the food that they're going to use. Because it's not going to last if they don't. And if you got a whole cow, what are you going to do with that whole cow? If you just sacrifice something to one of the gods and it's a part of the market there, they want to sell that as quickly as possible, because what's it going to do if it sits there very long? It's going to rot. It's just going to go rotten. And so when Jesus looked at him, he said, you are the salt of the earth. And this is a picture of what's going on in our world. This world is rotting. And it's just deteriorating, and left alone, what's it going to do? It's going to get worse. Hard to comprehend that when you live in a society that teaches evolution, and evolution says everything is getting what? Better. Man, it started out crawling, and then it got, it started out with no feet, and then it was able to stand, and it was able to do this. So for years, people thought, oh, the world's getting better and better. Man, I'd hate to see what worse is like if this isn't worse than it used to be, when you see methamphetamines and all the other things that are going on in our society. When you see the sex trafficking, and you see the abortions, and you see... Is this better? I don't think they used to kill millions of... Well, when Herod said, let's kill all the baby boys 2 years of age and under, that was a localized area, and it happened. But to kill the baby in the womb, or to kill, and it's getting better? Look, everything they butchered was to eat was to be rubbed with salt. So you look at these porterhouse steaks and these ribeye steaks that are right there. They look pretty decent. If you could just heat up the grill right now and just throw it on there and sear that thing up and just, nice everything. But they didn't have this, because everything they had would either spoil, or they rubbed what into it? The salt. Now, we do that a little bit. Some of you eat beef jerky. You ever eat it? Raise your hand if you've ever had that. Oh my goodness, almost every one of you. When I've had that, yeah, I really like the taste of it, But when I bite into that, I might as well just take my belt off and start going. I feel like I'm just biting into a piece of leather. Why? Because it's so saturated with preservatives, especially what? Salt. Man, it can't hardly ever go bad. You could grab it up 100 years from now and you'd go, tastes the same, you know. The Lord says, but you're the salt of the earth. And the problem is, Christians have ceased. They've lost their savor. They're not salty. And so when we're applied to the world, they go, oh, you believe the same thing I do. Oh, you think just like I do. Oh, you haven't said you objected to it. I thought you were okay with that abortion, Mom. And we need to be salt. Let me show it to you this way. This is what happens in our world if left alone. I'll let you look at it, figure it out, see what it is. What do you think it is? Well, it's a lot of things feeding on something. It's a dead possum just being eaten away by maggots. What happens in our society if it's left alone? This kind of stuff. And this is the physical world, and you just need to comprehend what happens in the physical world goes on in the spiritual world. Things just get rotten, unsaid, uncorrected. When you cease to be the salt, then it just goes any way it wants to. And that's why you have churches in America today that are talking about ordaining homosexual pastors. That's why you have churches in our society today that are talking about same-sex marriage. That's why you have churches today that don't take a stand on anything that's biblical. Because the salt has lost its savor. But you're the salt of the earth. And what's the salt going to do? It's going to impede. You're not going to stop it, but it's going to impede the rottenness that goes on in our society. God could stop it, but people are going to continue to choose sin. We know the end of the story. And the Lord's going to come back someday and he's going to settle all that. But in the meantime, you're the salt of the earth. And your responsibility is to be salt and light with your kids and your neighbors and the people you work with. Let me give you something else that shows you the world getting rotten at times. It's just a swamp. Unattended, uncared for. What happens to most of our areas? You ever try to do that with your backyard? What's it end up looking like? It looks a whole lot better when you take care of it. When you water it, you mow it, and you weed it, and you fertilize it. But unkept, what happens? It just goes bad. And this kind of an area, wow, this is great for mosquitoes and the West Nile virus and all those kind of things. Let me give you another one. Oh, you'll like that one. They're feeding rats in Cambodia there. Let me just give you the background on it. They're actually nurturing those. You know, we go, oh my goodness, there's a rat. There are rats in this valley. I'm not talking about people now. I'm not, we were sitting in our house probably a year and a half ago, and we saw, you know, there's a golf course right up our backyard, and there's a fence, and this metal fence that's right between us and the golf course. And we saw this rat going right down the top of that. My wife could have just gone through the ceiling. Oh, there's a rat! There's a rat! And so we got rat poison and put it out. But the neighbors, rats go where there's water. That golf course has a lot of water. And it goes where there's food. And the people in the neighborhood have their cats and their dogs and set the food outside. And so they're just feeding. And so, but you see on the screen? Listen to this. In 2008, the poor people of Cambodia, I had another picture of a little boy fishing down inside that for something as well, while all the rats were around the other side. I thought maybe I would just tell you about that one instead of showing you this little guy digging in the rat bucket. In 2008, the poor people of Cambodia were struggling. You're not going to believe this. Because what happens in our world? We're in what kind of a world? A deteriorating, a rotten kind of world. If left alone, it just gets worse. It doesn't get better. Here's what it says in 2008. The poor people of Cambodia were struggling as demands pushed the price of rat meat up to around $1.48 a kilogram. They're selling rat meat, folks. At that time, in 2008, Cambodia was supplying around a metric ton of rats a day to Vietnam. Metric ton, just so you know, is 2,204 pounds. A day as food. How would you like to have to say to your kids, hey, today we got a treat for kids? And you put a little skewer and you rotate that little rat, And then you could break off and crunch it down a little bit. But our world's getting better. We've got a commentary going on up here. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is the world getting better? No. They say that every day, on average, there are 10 rats born for every person on the face of the earth. Do you comprehend that? And that's after we've done everything we can to try to eradicate them. What would it be like if we had left it unchecked? Do you understand? You're the salt. And what goes on in our world? It's getting worse. But we're to come along and we're to give it direction and be salt and light. That's why, this past week as I sit down with couples or parents or family, I say, you need to be telling your kids this. Well, they might get upset. You're the parent. You love on them, but give them direction. You're salt. Let me give you another picture. This is just one of our homeless people. Is our society getting better? 40 years ago, 50 years ago, you never saw any homeless people. Look, let's do it this way. We're to be salt in the world. Here's the picture. 1, you're there to slow down this rotting, deteriorating condition in our society. The second reason for salt is this. As salt, the Lord uses us to give flavor to an otherwise tasteless society. When they do some things in our society, sometimes we say to people, wow, that's tasteless. Why did you do that? We talk about what they did as being tasteless. Or again, maybe insipid, bland. Just has no taste to it. Here's what the text says. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? I want you to understand that you need to ask the Lord to give you that bite, that salty taste, that saltiness that cuts through and preserves, that cuts through and gives flavor. Let me illustrate it this way. When I grew up, I didn't like this vegetable. I didn't like potatoes. Here's what happened. You want me to tell you the real truth? I didn't like them because I learned it was the way my mom cooked them. What can I say? And so she would just boil the potatoes and then put on her plate. Then you'd have to break it up and maybe a little bit of margarine, and then some salt and pepper. And I would like the roast maybe she fixed or something like that, or the corn. But then she'd say, you're not leaving the table till your potatoes are done. What I do is I'd take a fork full of potatoes, put it in my mouth, grab my glass of milk. Try to just choke it down. It was just dry and whatever. Wasn't until I was either late in college, I was in Chicago at MBI, and I don't remember, I think I was working at the school at that time, but I went to a real fancy restaurant. And I'm there, and I order, and they want a baked potato with that. I'm thinking, I said, okay. The person, I don't remember, I think I had a couple people waiting on us. I mean, it was really kind of a fancy place, and so they wanted to know, would you like butter and sour cream with that? Believe it or not, I didn't know what to tell them because I'd never had that on a potato before. And I said, sure, I'll try it, They came and they prepared it right at the table. It wasn't me preparing it and doing anything to it. I watched them, and ever since then, when I have a baked potato, I just do what they did. They took it, they just, put their fist, crushed it a little bit, and then popped it open, cut it open, put the butter in, put the sour cream on, started mixing it up. Went and got some more butter. Some more sour cream, some salt, mixed it up. I'm looking at this going on. I'm thinking, this looks like I'm going to get a mashed potato, not a baked potato. And they just kept doing that. And then they gave it to me, and we prayed, and I went to eat. I took that first bite of that potato. That potato kind of looked like this, And I took that first bite of that potato, and my tongue went, it was like a pinball machine. Bing, 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 bing. And I'm thinking, where has this potato been all my life? I had not a clue why my mother had fixed what she'd fixed. And I said, that I can take the rest of my life. And so you'd ask my wife, one of the hardest things she has to fix for me, well, we don't fix much anymore, is a baked potato. Because it's not done enough. When you take a baked potato, and it's kind of hard on the inside, you get to be a connoisseur of good baked potatoes. Because when you get that salt and everything in, it's what we're supposed to be in the world. I've discovered that everything that God made is pretty good if it's fixed right. Even broccoli. Do I need to tell that to the George Bush one? Was it broccoli he didn't like? He needs to taste my wife's broccoli. God makes wonderful things. But what's sad? Is the world thinks Christians are like some broccoli. Because the brand of Christian they've come across is not Christ-like, and not gentle and easily to be entreated, not having their speech seasoned with salt, not speaking the truth in love. But if we do those kind of things, the world would say, wow, I understand. And the Lord would say, there's salt and light in the world. Let me give you something else that I rather enjoy. Corn. The first time I really had corn like it should be fixed was in Sherman, New York. And I came back from college, and I was at the Spinks house. And they had this farm, and they had just taken, it was at a college group that night. So here I am about 19, 20, and they took the ears right off the stalks. And then they had soaked them in water. They pulled back the husk, soaked them in water, and then pushed the husk back on, and then put it in over charcoal, and just rotated it until it cooked. And then it was time to think about eating them. But what they did to eat them, they had like a coffee can about yay high, and in most of it was water, and across the top was about an eighth of a stick of butter or a quarter of a stick of butter that had just melted because they had the water was all warm, and they had the butter melted on the top. And so when you put the corn down through, the corn went right down through all the butter and right back up. So it was just drenched. Shall I say it this way? Hold on just a second. Okay. Now that I got it off my chin, it was just drenched with cholesterol. More. And then I said, oh, it needs something else. It needs this, doesn't it? Oh, yes. It's like going to a movie, and you're going to have popcorn. And you got the popcorn and the butter and the salt. But this way, you just had it's right on the cob. And I'm going, and I finished that, and I said, I think I'll have another one. And I took a second one. And I went, like a typewriter, just eating it away. And I said, I think I'll have a third one. I ate 3 of them. It was just so good because the corn was so fresh. And that was, and God says, you are the salt of the earth. And people enjoy if you do it biblically. Now you're going to speak the truth, but you're going to do it in love. And you're going to let your speech seasoned with salt. But the problem is, most of the time people aren't willing to be salt. Oh, I'm going to offend them. Oh, they'll be upset. Oh, they won't want anything to do with me. If they don't want anything to do with you, you can't do anything about that. Who would you rather please, them or the Lord? He said, you're the salt. And he didn't say, hey, I want you to become salt. As soon as you became a believer, you are salt. He didn't say become salt. He said, you are the salt of the earth. So let's start doing some of our savoring. Let me give you another one. I love pistachios. Now, I'm not sure I really like them or not, but I sure like the salt that's on them. My wife got a bag of pistachios, and she set them in a little container right beside where I study, and she says, here, And so I picked up one, tried it. Man, I thought, wow, I'm just sucking all the salt off of it. Wow, that tasted good. And then I kind of break it open and get rid of the shell and eat the nut. And I thought, wow, that was pretty good. I'll try another one, and another, and another. Of course, I ate all of them that were right there. And she'll say, do you have to be so noisy in eating those? Because you hear that crunch. Does he do that too? Oh, you're laughing. I thought maybe he did it too. I'm not sure I like the nuts so much as just the salt. And I take it in, but I eat the nut too. But I hazard a guess, if she'd have bought a bag of pistachios that were just pistachios and hadn't been laden with salt, I don't know. They don't grow that way, do they? Anybody know? Huh? No, they don't grow salt? Okay. D. James Kennedy wrote a book. It was entitled, What If Jesus Had Never Been Born? If Jesus had never been born, this world would have continued to deteriorate much more rapidly than it has. Can I read to you some of the things he said? Here's what he says. Quote from his book. Despite its humble origins, the church has made more changes on earth for the good than any other movement or force in history. The church, the body of Christ. To get an overview of some of the positive contributions Christianity has made through the centuries, here's a few highlights. They were the first to put in hospitals, which essentially started in the Middle Ages. Do you realize Christianity understood science and understood that we live in a world that is structured and that we can count on this is going to happen and the stars and the moon's going to come up and the sun's going to come up, and it's structured. It's not happen chance, which is amazing that evolution comes out of such an idea of a system of structure. Hospitals were created by churches and God's people. Universities, which also started in the Middle Ages, but when you think of other universities, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, started by what? Churches. But today, what do they want to do with churches? Oh man, churches, they're dumb. They don't understand. You know, guess who started them? How sad it is that those organizations have slipped so far. Representative government, especially in America, came out of Christianity. Abolition of slavery. In England, it was William Wilberforce, who, as a believer, said, this is wrong before God. We need to get this right. All these major changes happened as a result of Jesus Christ. If he had never come, think what would have happened. He goes on in his book, the elevation of women and children. You know, women were just possessions. They were just things before Jesus came along. And Jesus said, wait a minute, husbands, love your wives like I love the church, and gave himself for her. He elevated them. And now the world's coming along and wanting to pull you back down so you're equal with men. Do you really want to be equal with men? You know, going to scratch themselves and itch and spit and do, you know. I mean, you know how men are. Some of you live with them. And you know how filthy they can be. I'm sorry, sweetheart, over here. This little gal. But our society is saying, you deserve what they have. You don't want what men have. Now, if you're working and you deserve the same pay they do, that's fine. We understand those kind of things. But don't want to be pulled down to the level that God put you up to be honored as a wife and as a mother and as a woman. He goes on. The establishment of charitable organizations, the condemnation of sexual perversion and trafficking. It's the Christians that are trying to stop the sale of little girls in South America and in Colombia, South America, and in Thailand and in those Indonesian countries. They're selling little girls. They're kidnapping them and drugging them up and having them do sex with multiple men, multiple times a day. Christian organizations are the ones that are going in and raising the money to buy those kids out of that. One of the guys that used to attend here, Tony Sandoval, who was an FBI agent when he was here, and he went back and he served the Lord and wonderfully in that area. Then he retired from that, and then he went into working with a Christian organization to stop trafficking of little girls in South America. It's so rampant in South America, and it's worse in the Indonesian countries. And it's Christians that are saying, this is wrong. Let's stop this. Just think of the great works of art and music that were inspired by the church. Handel's Messiah and those kind of things. Oh, look. These are some of, let me go the other way here. These are some of the things that have happened. Christianity gave women the dignity they deserve. Christians took kids out of the factories. Do you realize kids used to be in factories? And the Industrial Revolution came along, and Christianity said, look, kids don't belong in there. We get upset at China for what they're doing and other organizations, other states that are making kids work. We used to do it too. But Christianity stopped that. If I went to the bottom one there, China, one child per family policy. You know what they do if you find out you're pregnant and it's going to be a girl? What do they often do in China? They abort. The child gets born, they kill it. Because if they can only have one child, what do they want to have? They want to have a boy because the boy can carry on the family name. But Christians are going in and saying, what are you doing? This has to stop. We'll adopt those children. We'll take them. If you don't want them, we'll take them. It's because Christians are the salt of the earth. And they have some savor, some flavor in this bland, insipid society. And says, hey, we'll take them. We'll help them. Don't you want to do that? You're the salt of the earth. We're to be salt in this world. Let me give you a few things here. There are 4 pictures. The Lord uses us to impede the rotting condition in our society. The Lord uses us to give flavor to an otherwise tasteless society. As salt, the Lord uses us to make this world thirsty for himself. They're not thirsty for the Lord. What does he say? Blessed are those that hunger and thirst after righteousness. They'll be filled. But that's why later on he comes right along and he says, look, if you're the salt of the earth, well, someone said it this way. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him what? Drink. Okay? That is true. But let me give you one other thing that you really need to know. That's right. But you can give him salt. And if you give a horse enough salt, what's he going to want to do? Drink. He's going to find some water. I want to say to you, you say, well, they're just not interested in the Lord. Oh, they're just not interested in the Lord. Keep giving the salt. Be to them what they need. Season your words with salt. So that it's not bland. And can I tell you what is bland in our society? Political correctness. What do they want to do? They want to take every bit of guts out of any stand that anybody takes. And they'll say things because, oh, that's a politically correct way to say it. We don't want to offend anybody. We just want to tell the truth, folks. If they're offended by the truth, then there's nothing I can do about it. I can still love them because I'm going to be seasoned with salt and I'm going to speak the truth in what? Love. I need to keep moving here. John 7. Beginning at verse 37, on the last day, the most important day of the feast, Jesus stood up and cried, if anyone is thirsty, he should come to me and drink. Jesus said, people are thirsty, but you got to give them enough salt so that they'll be thirsty. You're the salt of the earth. Let's do our job. Let me go back real quick to the fourth point. I didn't realize how far I had gone beyond the time here. Last one. Just like salt, the Lord uses us as one of the most common and simple things in life. Everybody uses salt. Or they know what it is. They have access to it. The Lord says, I want you to be that way, where everybody has access to some salt in this world. Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled by man. You're the what? Salt of the earth. Notice that he didn't say it this way. You are the gold of the earth. Why didn't he say that? Gold is valuable. This morning when we were singing, Purify my heart, let me be as gold and precious silver, I was singing, purify my heart, let me be as salt, pure salt, because there's not much gold to go around, but there is a lot of salt. And if I'm the right kind of salt, he didn't say gold. Not everybody has access to gold, but everybody has access to salt. He said, I want you to be like salt. This is not what he's going to do. It's not going to be gold. He says, you're something simple. Like 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 26 to 29. Brothers, consider your calling. Not many are wise from a human perspective. Not many powerful. Not many of noble birth. Instead, now he's talking about the kind of people God chooses to do the work he needs to have done in the society. He says, but God chooses, verse 27, instead, God chooses what is foolish and weak and insignificant and despised and what is viewed as nothing. That's what God wants to do. He wants to take me, a nothing, a nobody, somebody who's foolish and weak and insignificant and despised and nothing. And then he says, okay, now if I use you, people go, wow, it's God. But see, if I'm some really wonderful guy and some really smart genius kind of guy, and I have all sorts of multiple talents and everything. And people go, wow, he's a talented guy. And they think that you get the credit instead of God, because if he can take somebody that's simple, foolish, and weak, and despised, then they go, wow, I can't believe how God did that to grow that church and use that, or did that for that family and do that. That's wonderful. This same passage is found in Luke 14, verses 34 and 35. A little bit different in the wording. He says it this way. Now, salt is good. Don't let that get out to the American Dietary Association. They'll probably want to ban the Bible, or at least that verse. Salt is good in moderation. Now, salt is good, but if salt should lose its taste, how will it be made salty? It isn't fit for the soil or for the manure pile. You like that echo? Did you get it? Not even fit for the manure pile. Look, you need to be salt. You need to ask God to increase that saltiness so that the people around your life will begin to thirst for Christ. But the question I have for you is, are you being poured out for Christ? Salt is no good if it's just in the shaker. The Lord wants to tip you upside down and pour you out into the lives of other people. You are the salt of the earth. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, take us as salt and let us have an impact on other people. For your glory and your glory alone. In Jesus' name, amen.